Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Family Matters series. We're so happy to have you join us for this episode. Our topic today is managing aggression in loved ones with dementia. And this is a really relevant topic for anyone caring for someone with dementia or anyone that has a loved one with dementia. This is a topic that we've touched on in other Family Matters episodes, but I think it will be really beneficial to have a full episode dedicated to it. And because aggression and dementia can be very distressing for caregivers and family members. So, for this episode, we are joined by our expert, Dr. Melissa Tanner. Dr. Tanner is a psychologist and she is the Vice President of Education at Counterpoint Health Services. Dr. Tanner, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Would you mind taking just a moment to introduce yourself and tell our families a little bit about yourself and maybe your role at Counterpoint Health Services?
Sure. As you said, I'm a clinical psychologist. I specialize in the care of older adults. I've been with Counterpoint since 2013. That was my first job after getting my psychology license. And I feel really fortunate to have found a company that's supported my career development as Counterpoint has. I am currently the vice president of education. So that means I spend about half my time seeing patients, doing psychotherapy and neuropsychological assessments. The other half I spend working on education. So that means delivering education to our facility partners, to our Counterpoint staff, and also to family members. Um, I guess I will just say I was drawn to working with older adults mainly because, working with an underserved population can be incredibly rewarding. But one thing I didn't realize was when working with older adults, families are kind of part of the package deal. And being able to work with the families in addition to working with the older adult patients, supporting them through caregiving stress and grief has kind of sort of extended the impact beyond just the individual patient, and that makes it even more rewarding. Um, I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to join Family Matter series. Um, I think it's just an additional way to reach people, and the on-demand nature of the videos means they're more convenient, more accessible, and it's just another way of providing education. So I appreciate you having me here.
That's great, and I agree. I think Family Matters is very valuable to a lot of our listeners.
Mhm.
And with your background and role, you're definitely a subject matter expert on the topic of aggression in dementia.
Yes, that comes
All
up a
right.
lot.
Well, before we talk about why aggression may occur and some strategies to handle it, just so that we're all on the same page, what do we mean when we say aggression in dementia? And could you maybe give some examples of what aggression might look like?
Sure. Well, the aggression could be physical, so hitting, biting, scratching, throwing things. I think most commonly you see older adults pushing, grabbing, pinching when the caregiver or family member is trying to provide care around ADLs or activities of daily living. That can be a really kind of vulnerable time. Um, so physical, it could also be verbal, like yelling, making threats, profanity, other kinds of offensive language. Often it can be something that's not characteristic of a person. So the hostile tone or profanity are really different from how someone presented before they developed dementia. So that can make it even more disturbing. But I mean, whether or not the aggression is physical or verbal, it certainly adds to the caregiver burden.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, whether these behaviors are physical or not, they could really create, just as you said, a very stressful situation for families and caregivers. So,
Mhm.
Dr. Tanner, are these aggressive behaviors something that we would expect to see early on when someone is diagnosed with dementia, or is this something that is typically seen later, as the person's dementia progresses?
Yeah, it's a good question. I want to preface my answer with a little discussion about dementia in general. So, as you know, dementia is actually not a single disease, but rather an umbrella term for a syndrome or a collection of symptoms, rather than a specific disease. So, under that umbrella, you have diseases like Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia. Um, each of these has a slightly different course and presentation. So different areas of the brain are affected, and therefore you'll see different behaviors. Um, and one example in frontotemporal dementia, you do often see personality and behavioral changes early, but generally, for most other kinds of dementia, aggressive behaviors tend to be seen later. So, as the dementia progresses, the person's ability to regulate their behaviors declines. And so, it's usually not until the later stages of the disease that you see aggression.
That makes sense. Thank you for all that information and for the information just on dementia in general. I think
Mhm.
that's helpful for our listeners to know.
Yeah.
You alluded to it just a little bit a moment ago, but could you explain for our listeners the reason that these aggressive behaviors occur in dementia?
Yes. And that is probably the most important thing to talk about because understanding the reason for it is really the key to managing it or preventing it. There could be, that said, there could be a lot of different reasons why a person who has dementia may be acting or reacting aggressively. So, first, I would say when a person has dementia, the part of the brain that regulates their emotions and behavior isn't working well. So, um, if something upsets us, we're able to kind of monitor our reactions and regulate them and maybe cope in adaptive ways. But a person who has dementia doesn't have those skills to kind of mitigate their reactions. So they don't have those self-soothing skills that we might have. Second, the person has impaired comprehension skills, which can lead to a lot more disconnects, a lot more frustration that kind of feeds into the behavioral disturbances. So they may become frustrated if they don't understand what we're asking them to do or why. And so that can lead to aggression. And finally, oftentimes the behavior speaks to an unmet need that maybe they're not able to communicate to us. So maybe they're hot or thirsty or tired or in pain, but they don't have a way of telling us. And so they might act aggressively in order to try to communicate that. And sometimes the behavior becomes a form of communication.
That makes so much sense. So, our listeners might be wondering if these aggressive behaviors that we're talking about are a certainty. And they may be wondering if their loved one will eventually become aggressive if they have dementia. Maybe someone is listening and thinking, well, I haven't seen anything like this in my mom, and she has dementia. So, my question is, Dr. Tanner, do aggressive behaviors occur in everyone with dementia at some point?
Yeah, you're so right that I think family members are often looking for some sort of like blueprint and how is this dementia going to progress? Is my mom or dad or loved one going to become aggressive? Um, Unfortunately, it's really hard to give someone kind of an exact map for how the dementia is going to progress, or whether the person is going to exhibit certain symptoms. But I would say no, certainly aggressive behaviors don't occur in everyone with dementia. Um, we refer to behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia as BPSD, and that's sort of just a way to refer to all the sorts of symptoms of dementia that are not cognitive, so not memory loss, not degraded comprehension skills. These behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia are highly prevalent in people with dementia. It's about 90% prevalence rate. But aggression is only one BPSD. So other examples include wandering, exit seeking, disrobing, anxiety, delusions. So it is highly likely that someone with dementia will have one BPSD, but it is not, they will not necessarily exhibit aggression. And while we can't predict whether a person will exhibit aggression, the good news is we can predict sort of by examining patterns and potential triggers, we can predict when they might become agitated or aggressive. And um, through a process of trial and error, we can figure out which strategies work best to manage those behaviors.
That's great to know. And it sounds like, honestly, we could do several more Family Matters episodes on some of the different BPSDs.
Hmm.
Um, but focusing on aggression today. So we've
Yeah.
talked about what aggressive behaviors are and why they occur. Let's segue into how we can mitigate and manage this aggression. So maybe you could tell us what are some things that caregivers and family members or friends could do or maybe not do while interacting with the person to avoid them becoming aggressive.
Definitely. I think sometimes we unknowingly set a person up for aggression. We can do this simply by not greeting them properly when we enter their room, or sometimes we fail to make sure they understand what we're there to do and how we're going to do it. And so that can make a person with dementia feel threatened. So take an example of a woman who is lying on her bed and has her back facing the door. Say the caregiver enters to get her dressed for an appointment, but doesn't kind of greet her in a way that the person hears or recognizes that someone's there. So the person might try to remove her blankets, but she hasn't heard that someone's entered the room. So she's going to be, or she might become defensive, thinking,
Mhm.
who is this person? She may push them away. So you can see how our approach really matters in preventing some of these behaviors. So there are things we can do to improve the caregiver connection and reduce risk of aggression happening. So, in this example, we want to walk into the room, greet the person, take a moment to ensure that they've heard us. Before we remove the blanket, we want to tell her, okay, I'm going to remove the blanket now, and explain why, you have an appointment, so we have to get dressed now. We'll want to repeat key information as needed, recognizing that this interaction might take longer, and we're going to need to be adaptable. We can't just kind of um, expect that things are always going to go smoothly. We have to leave room for to be flexible when someone has dementia because we don't know kind of what might trigger them on a specific day. So we have to remain flexible in our approach. Um, we also want to try to anticipate their care needs, knowing that they might not be able to express them. So, oftentimes, anticipating someone's toileting schedule or kind of asking them if they need a drink, knowing that they might not have the cognitive skills to ask for a drink when thirsty.
Mhm.
So, we want to try to kind of get ahead of these things and anticipate something that they may need before they reach the point um, where they're getting frustrated and they have this unmet need that's becoming more urgent. Another thing, I think, whenever possible, we want to give them choices so that they feel that sense of agency. With dementia, the person is often struggling with the loss of control in personal care decisions. So the more we can kind of give them back that sense of control, the better to kind of preventing frustration, agitation, and aggression.
Those are really helpful tips. And then, Dr. Tanner, just to tack on to that question, are there other things that could help to proactively avoid these aggressive behaviors? Like, for example, the setup of the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to do whatever we can to reduce overstimulation. So that means we want to do whatever we can to avoid loud noises, crowded spaces, chaotic environments that can trigger distress. So a person with dementia has what we call a compressed stimulus buffer. That means that the threshold for what makes them overwhelmed is much lower. So you want to anticipate that and try to avoid, as I said, the loud noises, the crowds, sudden movements that can trigger distress. So we also want to make sure that the environment has adequate lighting. We, especially because in the evenings, people with dementia are known to misperceive shadows. So the more that we can kind of reduce that risk, the better. We want to remove clutter, potential hazards that could cause confusion or agitation. And I will also add, if your loved one is in a residential care setting, we want to make sure their environment has objects that can be used to orient them or provide comfort. So like photos of family, memorabilia that has significance to them, anything that can kind of make the environment feel more like home and less clinical is good.
That makes sense. Those are some really great tips and strategies. And then we hear a lot about the importance of engagement and activities during the day. Is it true that engagement in activities during the day can help to manage aggressive or even some of those other adverse behaviors that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, absolutely. Meaningful engagement has been shown to reduce behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia, including aggression. So it is critical that an older adult has access to activities that provide them with that, and it is especially important because when you reach the later stages of dementia, older adults are not able to initiate that activity themselves, whereas you or I might, pick up a book or, listen to music or we're able to kind of satisfy that need for ourselves, but someone with advanced dementia can't. Um, just a quick word on meaningful engagement itself. It's defined as purposeful, personalized activities that can enhance an older adult's quality of life. So this could be something that taps into a former role or identity. So take, for example, a woman with dementia who used to teach music. Um, an example of meaningful engagement for her might be taking part in a drum circle or playing an instrument with a loved one. Maybe if she has a grandchild, they could play the xylophone together. Just something that has that can kind of activate a remote memory. Memories from earlier in one's life are more likely to be preserved. So um, a lot of meaningful engagement kind of taps into earlier life memories as opposed to kind of more recent memories. I will put in a plug for the BCAT MemPick series, which is a great resource for meaningful engagement. It's a book series that covers a lot of different topics. So there is one for everyone, depending on your interest and background. But it's a great way for family members to foster meaningful engagement with their loved ones because it gives kind of direct prompts and stories that don't require the older adult to kind of initiate the conversation. They're really just responding to the prompts, but they're able to tap into preserved memories and they feel a sense of kind of fulfillment, accomplishment from completing that kind of activity. So, so that kind of activity, meaningful engagement in general, is critical for preventing BPST.
It's great. And I'm glad that you defined meaningful engagement because it sounds like, based on what you've said, that just pulling somebody into an activity that's not meaningful to them, maybe it's something that they didn't even enjoy prior to the onset of their dementia, that could really just trigger more aggression.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. Yep.
um, okay. So I just want to acknowledge or maybe mention to our listeners that it's possible that you're doing everything right And you use the strategies that Dr. Tanner recommended, but some of this aggression still occurs. So, in this case, despite best efforts, if a person with dementia does become aggressive during an interaction, how could the caregiver or family member handle the situation like right in that moment?
Yes. So we do our best to prevent it, but if we can't, first and foremost, we want to remain calm. It can be hard to do if someone's very agitated toward us and using profanity or offensive language, but it's crucial that we remain calm and non-reactive in response. So we want to speak softly and slowly. We want to avoid sudden movements that could be misperceived as threatening. Um, we want to give them personal space, and also protect ourselves if it looks like they might be becoming physically aggressive. We don't want to argue or try to correct delusions because that's going to, to them, whatever they believe is very real to them, and so correcting it can just kind of engender mistrust and exacerbate that aggression or sense of agitation. Um, if possible, we want to try to distract and redirect the person. Sometimes that doesn't work if a person is really extremely agitated and aggressive. So um, we want to try that, but if not, it's okay. You do want to try to abandon whatever your agenda was, because in that moment trying to push it is only going to result in further agitation or aggression. So we're going to put aside whatever care task we came in to complete. um, if you can't manage it on your own, it's okay to call for help. Give the person space, call for help. um, And the good news is that dementia is dynamic, and for a more acute episode of aggression, typically only lasts a few minutes. Um, and after the episode, I would say it is critical that you take stock of what happened leading up to the behavior, because you want to use that as information to help you adapt your approach in the future. Um, it and it can be difficult to pinpoint. It might not be something you did. It might be something internal to the patient. Could be a sign of pain. But we want to really explore what the reason was so that we can address it and either adapt our approach or kind of take care of whatever the unmet need was. And finally, I will just say, don't take it personally. The aggression is not a reflection of the quality of the care that you're providing. It's not a reflection of your loved one's character either. It's simply an expression of the disease.
That's a really, really good reminder. Um, One last question, and this is triggered by something you said a moment ago about asking for help when you need it. For any of our listeners that might have a loved one that is not currently being seen by a behavioral health provider, but maybe is beginning to demonstrate some aggressive behaviors, could you point them in the right direction to get started with a provider?
Sure. So, um, if the question is about cognition, I would say that the BCAT form virtual visit is a good idea. It can kind of clarify where your loved one falls on the cognitive continuum. I think that can be scheduled on the Enrich Visits website, and I think you're gonna put the link in the comments, so um, you should be able to find it there. So that would be a good resource for cognition. For a behavioral health provider visit, evaluations with Counterpoint behavioral health providers. Outpatient can be coordinated through the resource center, and there is an email um, that Jen, I think you could link in the comments as well.
Yes, we'll
But yeah.
link those things and then the Mempix books that you spoke about earlier. We'll see if we can link those too.
But yes, you are right. It is so important for family caregivers to reach out for help, and I think a behavioral health provider is a great resource for a family member or a loved one.
Great. Dr. Tanner, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and just sharing all of your extensive knowledge on this topic. This was really great information for families and caregivers, that might be dealing with this now or that might find themselves dealing with it down the road. And to all of our listeners, of course, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Family Matters.
Thank you.